Can you hear us? Can you hear us, Rusty?
I can hear you now.
All right, let's get going. Appreciate everyone for your patience. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order at 7:41, and Mr. Good will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States.
For which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so just a few things we're trying to get organized, and we will be doing meeting packets from now on. The pagination is off a little bit. I didn't realize it till after it was printed and didn't want to kill any more trees. So the front page is actually page 2, and then the inside cover is the agenda, and then everything else is in order. So in your packet are most of these, I believe all of them have been sent to you via email as well, but this is now collated. So in your packet are the minutes from June 7th, 2022 and July 5th, 2022. I would entertain a motion for approval.
Tony, just a quick question, please.
Yes, sir.
You had sent a text out saying that there were a couple changes. I did not see anything highlighted in June 7th or July 5th's agenda. Were there actual recommended changes to what had already been approved, which was the June 7th, 22 agenda?
Just some typo changes on names. That's it. Nothing material.
Very good. Is it possible to do one clarification insertion on the June 7th agenda regarding the transfer of the COG and the stage?
Okay.
Can we insert the word a transfer of legal ownership so it's clear what the transfer was? It wasn't just a physical transfer. It was the transfer of the legal ownership of the COG car and the horses and carriage.
So what Mr. Neal is referring to is on page 9. At the bottom under point 7, says Tony Perry made a motion to approve the transfer of assets to the UPass Historical Society. And Mr. Neal wants to make the distinction that that's a legal transfer of ownership or legal transfer of ownership. Is everyone amenable to that change?
Yes.
I'm seeing several nodding heads. Mr. Good?
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
So I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes with the clarification that Mr. Neal pointed out on page 9. Now line that out for you, Ms. Sullivan, later. Okay, so I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve. I'll do them one at a time. I'd like to make a motion to approve the June 7th, 2022 with the amendment that we just discussed.
Born seconds.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Any additional questions, clarifications?
Just that I'll abstain as I was recused for the majority of those meetings.
Okay. Okay, so with that abstention, we will call for the vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We probably should do a roll call vote. I'm too used to the debate. Okay, so we'll go through the roll call. Mr. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Good,
Yes.
Mr. Gamelki,
Yes.
Mr. Perry, aye. Mr. Miharis,
Abstain?
Ms. Riddell,
Yes.
Mr. Weatherford,
Yes.
and Mr. McCracken is absent.
And Rusty Neal is an aye.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Sorry. I put a space there to remind myself and I still missed it. So, okay, so I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of July 5th, 2022.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Ms. Riddell,
Born seconds.
Mr. Bourne seconds. We will, any additional questions, comments, additions, deletions, corrections? Okay, we will call for the vote. Mr. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Good,
Yes.
Mr. Gamilton,
Yes.
Mr. Perry, aye. Mr. Maharis,
Abstain?
Mr. Neal,
Aye.
Ms. Riddell,
Yes.
Mr. Weatherford.
Yes.
Okay. We will move on to starting on page 26, the treasurer's report. Ms. Riddell.
Yes, good morning. So we are going forward, going to be utilizing for invoices, a form from the City of Woodland Park. It's a submission form. So we're going to be using that going forward. And once things are approved, they'll be signed and turned over to the city manager. Today, we're presenting an invoice from Miss Allen. It's on page 27 and 28 for her hours.
And I think we will make a motion on each of these individually to put them in the record. So I would entertain a motion to approve Mrs. Allen's invoice for the month of July in the amount of $325.
I'll make a motion to approve Rebecca Allen's invoice in the amount of $325.
First by Mr. Neal. We have a second.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Maharis. Any questions, comments? Okay, we'll call for the vote. Mr. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Good,
Yes.
Mr. Gamilton,
Yes.
Mr. Perry, aye. Mr. Maharis.
Yes.
Ms. Riddell,
Yes.
Mr. Weatherford.
Yes.
And Mr. Neal.
Aye.
Thank you.
And we have a second invoice. So this is from the DDA attorney. And he presented 4 invoices to us at one time. The first one going back to March, March 3rd for $442. The second one from April 5th for $1,209.83. For May, $587.50. And from July, $1,075 for a total of $3,314.33. And he does have his detail as to what those hours are for on each of the attached invoices. Going forward, he is committed to presenting those invoices on a monthly basis.
Correct. Thank you. Okay,
Born moves to approve as presented.
okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Neal, first by Mr. Bourne. So I guess I will add a comment that the detail was reviewed. Frankly, I had no personal knowledge of any of these meetings, but they all seemed reasonable. Mr. Neal, I think you were involved in some of them. Do you want to comment or are you okay with moving forward?
I'm okay with moving forward. These were meetings that I had been tasked to reach out to him. I have not seen the actual charge, but if it's been reviewed and appears to be reasonable, I'm sure it was.
Yeah, they start on page 30 in your packet that I emailed to you.
Let me scroll.
So we have a first and a second. We will call for the vote. Mr. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Good,
Yes.
Mr. Gamilton,
Yes.
Mr. Perry, aye. Mr. Maharis,
Aye.
Ms. Riddell,
Aye.
Mr. Weatherford, Mr. Neal.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, we are also I'm going to move on to our typical, we have a couple TIF reimbursement requests that we received. We are getting a resubmission from Taylor Enterprises. There was a property that was not on the original list from the county, so we are going back and we are re-reviewing that list with the county again to be sure we have everyone. So with Taylor Enterprises, we are exploring the reimbursement of personal property taxes as he believes it was part of the agreement. So we are working with him to validate that. So the current reimbursement request that we have does not include personal property. So it's on page 35 and 36. So we are requesting a payment, a TIF payment to them for $2,810.79.
And I also believe we have the receipt of the tax payments on page 37 and 38. from it.
Yes, we do. For
Those are in your-
both properties.
Okay. I would entertain a motion to approve the resubmission of the Taylor Enterprises TIF agreement request. Yeah, we'll get to questions after we do the motion.
Born would so move.
Okay, we have a first by Mr. Bourne. Do we have a second?
I second.
Second by Ms. Riddell. She beat you. So you had questions.
So you said you're looking into this amount, correct?
No, this is for the property. We're looking into the personal
Okay.
agreement.
Which is the other one, which would be the $1,041.95.
No.
Mhm.
No, so on page 36, the actual spreadsheet and the master spreadsheet for the TIF reimbursements is held by Mr. Vasilati, the city finance director. So you'll notice on page 36 that numbers P005735 and P00574669, personal property, are not included at this time. Review by myself and Ms. Riddell, and in discussions with Mr. Taylor, we believe that it probably was included in the TIF agreement, but we haven't found a couple of documents to just substantiate that properly. And so he's going to work with us in the city, and we're going to dig through the documents a little bit more to make sure that we can validate it before we reimburse. So,
A point of information, Tony.
yes, sir.
I have just received communication from Kelly Case, a former city finance director, indicating that personal property taxes are excluded. So we probably do need to do a significant follow-up on this one because she's of the opinion that there would not be personal property taxes as a part of the TIF.
Yeah, and that's why we slowed down on this one to verify. There were precedent in the past where TIF reimbursements were done on personal property, so there is a little bit of a conflict there, so we are making sure.
Very good. Thank you.
So we have a first and a second on the TIF reimbursement for Taylor Mountain Enterprises LLC for 281079. Any further questions, comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll call for the vote. Mr. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Good,
Yes.
Mr. Gamelki,
Yes.
Mr. Perry, aye, Mr. Maharis,
Yes.
Ms. Riddell,
Yes.
Mr. Weatherford.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I'm an I also, Tony.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I know it's very hard to remember when you're sitting in the chair like you are.
All right, and we have a second TIF request from Woodland Park Associates. This is the Trail Ridge Apartments. So this request was from a different individual than what was in the agreement, but they have been validated that he is with the firm. And so the remittance address is proper. So they are requesting a TIF reimbursement for $64,143.76. And they have paid on the page 41, they have paid all of their appropriate taxes.
So I would entertain a motion
I'll make a motion to pay the TIF amount of $64,143.76 to Woodland Park Associates LLC as presented.
We have a first by Mr. Neal. Do we have a second?
Born will second.
Okay, we have a second. So are there any questions on this? Yeah, again, the actual spreadsheet that the city keeps is on page 40. Any questions? Okay, hearing, seeing none. We'll call for the vote. Mr. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Good,
Yes.
Mr. Gamelki,
Yes.
Mr. Perry, aye, Mr. Maharis,
Aye.
Ms. Riddell,
Yes.
Mr. Weatherford,
Yes.
Mr. Neal.
Aye.
I have one other item. We are going to be working with the city to produce a current expense to budget report. So we will have that going forward. And we will continue to review the agreements and tax reports to further refine our reimbursement processes.
Thank you, Ms. Riddell. Okay, so we're now on item 5, attorney meeting. On July 13th, Mr. Neal and myself had a phone meeting with DDA attorney Marcus McCaskill. This was my first introduction to Mr. McCaskill and getting to know him, getting to meet him. The intent, my background with a lot of vendors and attorneys that I've worked with throughout the years, relationship matters and making sure that clear lines of communication matters and we understand how we're going to work together. We spent approximately an hour of the DDA time. You'll see here the initial 14 discussion points that we had when we sent to Mr. McCaskill that items that we wanted to discuss. We got through 3 or 4 of them in an hour. That's shocking to me, not really. So I think the main takeaways from my perspective, and I'll let Mr. Neal weigh in. One, in general, we communicated the need to have the invoices monthly. It doesn't work well for us to get them 4 at a time. But most of the discussions centered around Mr. Neal's role on the DDA because we wanted to make sure he is the council liaison, but he also took on the additional duty of being the secretary, which is greatly appreciated. And we wanted to make sure there was no conflict there. Wanted to make sure that we understand his role. So as the city council liaison, I took away that he is a voting member of this DDA board when he's sitting on the board. And I also took away that, as usual with conflict of interest issues, that if Mr. Neal is aware of something happening at council that's in conflict with his role on the DDA board, it's his responsibility to step up and communicate that and, if appropriate, recuse himself. So, so that's a big takeaway. Some additional things we still need to discuss. Well, we communicated a few things. We did a general introduction. Number 3, protocols for working with an attorney. We didn't quite get to, but we expressed our desire as a board to establish some clear protocols of when we engage the attorney, how we engage the attorney. And I think in general, the idea is that we'll have a consensus that we need to engage the attorney from the board, and then we'll direct that happen. We also asked the attorney to be thinking about conflict of interest statement, but more than that, conflict of interest training for the entire board to make sure that we all are hopefully on the same page and understand that. It's a critical piece of any quasi-governmental or governmental entity board, any board in general, actually. We did generally discuss the Woodland Station applicant protocols and our desire that we were going to create a questionnaire that we would provide to both applicants in an attempt to get a side-by-side comparison to make it easier for the board. We discussed Rusty again. I indicated that we didn't have a desire to have any executive sessions, which means that anything that this board does, our goal is to do it out here in front of the public. It's not always comfortable, especially for the board members. And it's difficult, I think, sometimes, potentially if you're dealing with certain issues, but I think if done right, we can avoid those executive sessions. So we indicated that only in the case of some extreme situation would we desire that. We just talked about the Woodland Station process in general, and pretty much though, most of it centered around Mr. Neal and a few other items. Mr. Neal, do you want to weigh in on anything else you took away?
Yes, I actually do. And that has to do with my role as a DDA member in voting. I had actually spoken to two previous DDA liaisons, Robert Zuluaga and Kelly Case, on their thoughts on voting because they were both very opposite in their beliefs. Ms. Case did not vote all the time because she was of the opinion she would want to preserve her vote if there was going to be a vote at the DDA level and the city council level. Whereas Mr. Zuluaga felt that voting at both levels was appropriate. I actually went into that discussion with the city attorney, I'm sorry, the DDA attorney, leaning towards Ms. Case philosophies in preserving my vote to city council. It was an interesting discussion with our attorney, and it turns out that Mr. Zuluaga's voting was considered more appropriate. There's a reason why a city liaison is on the board. It is to cast a vote. So even though there may be times where I would vote as a DDA member and as a city council member on the same topic, it is good to have that vote at both levels. So I do plan to vote on things that I may vote as a city council member per the attorney's guidance. If it turns out that there's a slim possibility that there would be a QJ item, that is when it is appropriate for me to recuse myself. But most of our votes will be administrative at the DDA board. There shouldn't be any legislative at all. So of the three types of votes, the DDA will almost always do an administrative vote that I will participate in. And then I will also cast a vote at the city council level. And that is per the guidance of our DDA attorney. I did want to make that clear what guidance I had received.
Yep, I assumed you would. Thank you. And I concur that was reflective of the more detailed discussion that was had. Okay. So our goal, our commitment to you, board, is that by the next meeting, we're going to outline some basic guidance on how, when, where we will engage the attorney. Obviously, if we choose a developer today, there will be a lot of work coming up in the next several months in preparation for that and in execution of that. In general, though, I will say that sans some unknown event, and even with an unknown event, our position is that it will be communicated to Ms. Allen and pushed out to the entire board as we've been doing. In general, we should be able to line out what we're going to be talking to the attorney about, why we're talking to him, and get a general consensus from the board that it's appropriate before we spend those monies. So Is everyone okay with that? Okay, so we'll commit to having at least the starting basic guidance at next meeting in September. Okay, so next is a chair statement on the DDA commitment to Woodland Station, and I have another statement, and then we'll go through some additional items that came in over the last week since last week's meeting, because I want to make sure it was all this was sent out to the board, but one was sent late yesterday afternoon, so I want to make sure the DDA board members have a chance to review it before we proceed forward with the vote. But basically, regarding the commitment of this DDA board to whichever applicant is chosen, obviously there's potential for both applicants to ask for a TIF agreement in the future. And that's certainly consistent with what the DDA is for and the whole purpose of TIF and incremental financing. However, we believe that there is a lot more that the DDA can do in terms of sitting at the table with whichever developer is chosen, advocating with the city, for the city, being at the meetings if appropriate, talking with the city manager. There may be additional funds outside the community that we can plug into and that we can advocate for whichever developer is chosen in the form of grants or Army Corps of Engineer monies or road monies or environmental monies. What we're committing to as a board, we have a lot, in my opinion, talent up here from different modalities, is whatever we can do to provide an assist to the developer that's chosen, we're going to commit to that. And just period. So I wanted to read a statement. Everyone who knows me knows that I can wax on poetic forever. And so in an attempt to be more succinct, I will read my statement. It is on page 45 for the board members. Also, I will let you know that Mr. McCracken reached out and had an emergency, but is now in a position where he's going to attempt to dial in and participate via Zoom. Hopefully that'll be the case. So my statement, for the record, we are very grateful that there are 2 applicants willing to step up and develop Woodland Station for our community. Many, including I, have long stated that it would take a party or parties willing to step up and put forth the capital to see the rest of Woodland Station developed. I would be remiss if I didn't give acknowledgement to DDA boards who came before this board. This is an all volunteer board. And as far as I know, of all the DDA boards in the past and the members that I'm aware of and know, most of them had businesses, most of them had very intense jobs and responsibilities, but they took the time to volunteer and be a part of hoping to build up the downtown corridor, if you will. Although I've been fundamentally opposed to the existence of the DDA, I must admit there have been good, bad, and ugly outcomes beginning back in 2001. I tend to focus on the good. And so I think there have been a lot of projects that have come online. As a free market person, I believe they would have come online anyway, but it certainly did not hurt that they had an assist in the process. And I'm certainly not going to get in the way of that. Thankfully today, we have the luxury of learning the lessons of the past to inform us regarding the pathway towards the future. All developments come with inherent risk. One of the mistakes we do not want to make when the market calls is the mistake of slow rolling a decision or continuously punting on the decision. And so basically, every development that I've been involved with, that I've been a party to, they are just risky by nature. From a banking perspective, developments are one of the riskier things that a bank can do besides restaurant loans. You know, we have the benefit, this group here, of all the previous board members who went before us. We've already started reaching out to some previous board chairs and parties that were part of some different pieces like Woodland Station, Lot 1, Woodland Hardware, I mean. You know, we've reached out to Dale Schnicker and hopefully we'll be connecting with him to learn as much as we can about that process from the DDA perspective and how we can learn from that and move forward. So with the sitting board, we have successful community members who have shown the ability to be decisive in their own businesses and endeavors. To a person, this board will have the courage to decide and allow the developer to make something special in Woodland Station. We all have ideas on how and what we wish would happen in Woodland Station. Every single one of us have different visions in our head. And as I reflect on the last 20 years of watching all the DDA boards, there was always a vision and a hope and a wish. And hoping and wishing happens when someone steps up and puts the capital on the line. This board has shown wisdom to allow applicant Williams a 3-month non-compete last fall. This allowed ForgeWorks to emerge this year and take the lead on offering the DDA a vision to consider. You know, I think it was a great development. Mr. Williams has been kind of part of the dialogue since 2019. And I think, frankly, ForgeWorks and Chad Anderson and Mr. Crozier coming on board added tremendous value to that effort and was just great. The board again showed wisdom in offering a pause to see if there were other interested parties interested in developing at this juncture. And this actually allowed the Tava Group the opportunity to attempt once again to be in Woodland Station. So I think the pauses were appropriate, and I think it's great that we have 2 parties here that we're going to be addressing today. So although I have chaired for only 1 month, this board has expended energy to devise a questionnaire and to walk through a process that was fair and equal in application, giving both applicants the opportunity to state their case. I am confident that we did a good job as a board. I challenge each board member to weigh the information and to keep an open mind while deliberating. We have a duty to decide, and I feel confident that we have done the work to do the best job possible for the community. I will add that if we, when we take the vote moving forward, I have asked each board member to come prepared to succinctly explain why their vote, whichever way it is. I have not asked any board member how they're going to vote. And so, and I suspect most board members, as far as I could tell, have taken it very seriously and have been deliberative, and they have reviewed all the materials. I have confirmed that, but we will slow roll a little bit because I want to make sure the final week's materials come through. So on page 47, there is an email thread that I captured with Mr. Good asking the question. Remember last week we asked each applicant that if they had any additional information they wanted to provide, they could. We also said that if we had any questions from the board, we would communicate back out to them. There was only one question. It was from Mr. Good to the Tava Group.
And Tony, I'm going to recuse myself at this point.
Well, we're not
Not vote, so
Yeah.
whenever you think it's time.
Yeah, I think before the vote, because all of this information was provided even to the 2 DDA board members who were recused themselves from the vote. So yeah, you don't need to discuss or comment, but I'm just going through the process. So this is the email from Mr. Good. I just found this and need to be quick, but I recall that Tava Group indicated they would need money for the infrastructure and ForgeWorks said they did not. Did I hear wrong? Question mark. If Tava pays 800,000 but wants 2 million for infrastructure, then that's over $1 million the taxpayers are forced to pay. And the Forge Works deal is by far a better deal for the taxpayers of Woodland Park. Could you please clarify that for me? I don't feel a straight answer has been given yet. So in the packet on page 49, the Forge Works group provided us additional information. And basically it's a letter addressed to me. And it continues on through page 51. And they also provided a spreadsheet, which for some reason didn't get included here, but I know you received, kind of doing a nice job of, in their mind, outlining the differences between themselves and Tava. And then we did reach out to the Tava group and ask them to respond to Mr. Good's email. And also consistent with how we've been doing the process, the materials were posted up on the city site under the DDA buckets for Woodland Station. So the public can go see those at their leisure. So I'm going to ask the board members to take a minute. I think it would be worthwhile to, it'll probably take 3 or 4 minutes to go ahead and read again the letter from Forge Works, and go ahead and read again the letter from Tava. So we'll give you a few minutes to do that. Mr. McCracken is attempting to get connected now. Is there anything he has to do different? He may just be calling in. Let me check.
Tom's link is on the city calendar. That's what's the hard part. you know.
Mr. Bourne? I don't want to interrupt you, but let me know when you are finished.
Oh, okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Mr. Perry.
I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McCracken just indicated he'll be here in about a minute. So he finally got back into town, so. I think it's prudent to wait for him.
Would it be appropriate time to excuse myself?
Yes, sir, I had to.
Yeah, are we gonna jump right back into the voting? Because then I'll run back to the office so we can listen.
Well, we are, but we do have public comment 8 to 9. So I prefer when you infuse yourself.
Public comments.
No. I'd rather come back for public comment.
I can. Okay.
And the vote is next, so.
Yeah, so let me run now. No, I'll be, I'm a minute away.
Yes, sir.
That switched. We're over here yet. We're in a new scene. Alphabetical. At least I can get that.
Came back just in time for the hot
Oh, my
seat.
goodness.
Sorry, everybody, I had an emergency this morning.
Right here. Perfect.
Good.
Okay, I think we'll make a note that Mr. Weatherford and Mr. Maharis have recused themselves and left the room. We are on item 7. And how this will work, and I think it's appropriate, unless someone decides otherwise or wants to discuss it. I think there's 3 potential motions that could be made. We can make a motion to approve ForgeWorks as the developer. We can make a motion to approve Tava as the developer, or we can make a motion to approve neither. Okay, so there is that 3rd option. I think I felt compelled to actually mention that as an option. However, I'm going to encourage this board to make a decision. Personally, I've gone back 3 years and looked at all the meeting minutes regarding both applicants, the original apps in 2019, and of course, what we've experienced over the last 8 or 9 months. So I'm hoping that that 3rd option is not invoked. And so at this time, I would entertain a motion.
Excuse me, Tony,
Yes.
didn't, according to your email here, you're encouraging discussion to articulate our stance on it before we place a vote. So how would we do that if we? do
Yeah,
that?
so what I was encouraging is that we're going to make a motion. And so if that motion doesn't get a second, then that motion dies, for lack of a second, if we get a first and a second to approve one of the other applicants, then I think the best way to proceed, and I'm certainly open, is that we do the roll call vote, and that prior to the vote, for instance, Mr. Bourne would make a succinct statement as to why he's voting the way he's voting, and then make the vote. And we do that all the way down the line. I felt that this was important enough for us to articulate to the community why we were voting the way we were. And so that's what I asked us to do. And I think it's basically after the motions are made, then prior to your vote, articulate why you're voting and then make your vote. Does that make sense?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Al Bourne making a motion to approve the the Wagner project, the Talbot House Properties Group et al. As the primary lead developer of that property.
Okay, we have a
Does
first.
that cover enough of it?
Yeah, frankly, I think we can make a motion to approve Tava.
Just
or
call it
Forge
Tava
Works.
House, I guess. Okay.
Yeah.
It's Tava House Properties LLC and it's Forge Works LLC. So, so we have a first from Mr. Bourne to approve Tava House Properties as the developer on Woodland Station. Do we have a second?
Second, Matt McCracken.
Okay, we have a second by Mr. McCracken to approve Tava House Properties LLC as the lead developer. Okay. So the hot seat starts with Mr. Bourne. So please articulate why you're voting the way you are and indicate your vote.
Okay. My vote would be in the affirmative. It has been a fairly substantial thought process that's been going on ever since, one of our last meetings to try to figure out, where we needed to be. So I have come to my conclusion. The context is that this project to be of a commercial retail activity along with mid to upper income living facilities. The area to be developed as a community economic region, not just a residential or singularly a recreational region. To have appropriate open space, vegetation, colors, forms, shapes to stimulate interest. The non-residential facilities to stimulate destination motivation by residents and visitors. The DDA now has two very active proposals, each presenting a different format. Each group has highly skilled development teams and potential capital sources. It is recognized that the build-out has a multi-year timeframe subject to the widely variable market conditions. As I view the two projects, the Williams project, Forge Works, the Forge Works Group has a long-term awareness of this property and presented the desire to focus on a process to create the vision of Woodland Park community, subsequently resulting in the realization of that vision. Forge Works views adjacent properties as eligible to be included in the region's redevelopment. Forge Works has offered $200,000 cash for the 6.3 acres and will set up an infrastructure fund in the amount of 1.8 million. And that will require a well-defined expenditure guidelines. Over my tenure on the DDA board, I have been exposed to several vision projects which proved to be non-productive. Now to reflect on the Wagner project, the Tava House properties in that group. Tava House has expressed interest in the property since 2019 and currently wishes to purchase the 6.3 acres for a cash offer of $800,000. One then would look at to figure out the difference between 200,000 and 800,000. Reflecting back on an appraisal of 2019 for Lot 2 only, the Park and Associates valued that lot at $305,000 after the AmeriGas tanks were removed. In 2017, Teller County valuation for tax purposes was $577,173. As of the other day, on July 31st, the valuation within the county assessor's office now have been reevaluated to $96,670. It is very difficult to try to determine what a market valuation of property like this is in our region, because there's very few comparables. The true definition of the market value is when a willing buyer and a willing seller come to an agreement and purchase. That's the market value. The 800,000 is probably a very appropriate value for the dirt and the economic opportunity that that particular piece of property offers. Because there's two components to it. To me, there's the dirt and the economic opportunity that that particular project offers. And that kind of values that. The Tava House provides definitive plans for a dining and recreational destination type facility. This could potentially be classed as an anchor facility and or a launching point for the total project. The residential component to be of mid-level plus type facilities. Tava House provides a letter of commitment for both construction and mini-perm financing for the beginning of the project. And Tava House also expresses an interest in the possibilities for adjacent properties and how that can be incorporated into that total particular project. These are some of my thoughts as to why I find a great deal of support for the Tava House properties.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Bourne. And I will encourage each member to forward their narrative to Ms. Allen, so it makes it easier for her to do the minutes. So thank you, Mr. Bourne. Mr. Good.
Okay, this is me trying to talk. The offer, I'm gonna vote in the negative as to for Tava House. And this time, I'm gonna point out that the offer, Tava House is $800,000 offer, and we'll have a probable request for infrastructure costs, probable TIF, etc. Forge Works, $2 million, no infrastructure help, TIF by possible sub-developers only. The Tava offer has way too much potential for costing the DDA/public way more than they are offering to buy the property for. Could be $1 million or more, who knows? Clearly, the best financial deal for the taxpayers of the city is the Forge Works offer. Okay, open-ended deal is irresponsible and not in the best interest for the taxpayers. The word transparency has been used a lot ever since the new board has taken over. Yet I have a feeling I or the public are not getting the whole story or truth. The way city council removed every qualified board member and replaced them with no discussion. Arguably, the best attorney in the state was fired. I believe he knew too much. The Courier has not reported the whole story if it is uncomplimentary to certain people. Effectively, the public has been kept in the dark about what is really going on. Our discussions made today have to be made fairly and objectively with total transparency. Derek Wagner stated that they would still build on the site they own. What's better, 1 or 2 projects?
Thank you, Mr. Good. And again, please email that to Ms. Allen. Thank you. So nay by Mr. Good, aye by Mr. Warren. Mr. McCracken.
Yeah, I am in the affirmative for the Tava House developer. Pretty simple, cut and dry for me. The offer, I'm fine with the offer. Tava House has communicated that they understand that there are going to be infrastructure costs and they're going to collaborate with us in the city about that. So we know that that's going to be something that we're going to come to. You know, I like that they've got at least one real build-ready project as an anchor. And of course, there's got to be a couple design things done as far as the aesthetics go for the location. The other commercial elements that they're proposing are, you know, are appealing and seem like they are feasibly promising projects. And I also like that for the residential portion, you know, they've selected a firm, Weekly Homes, that they've proven themselves more than capable to execute a project of this size. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm in the affirmative.
Thank you, Mr. McCracken. Mr. Gamelki.
I'm nowhere near as wordy as Al, so it's not gonna happen, Al. Thank you for that, though. I am in the affirmative for the Tava House group. Part of it is the Forge Works is, although the Forge Works is new, Mike Williams has been around for a number of years now, and nothing seems to have come of that. Tava House is local. They've been around a long time. The guys have been around a long time. I think they have the interest of Woodland Park in you know, truly the interest of Woodland Park because they live here. They're amongst us. They are willing to put in their own money into it. They're not looking for, with Forge Works, they're still, although Forge Works presented very well, as Wagner presented very well, Forge Works doesn't seem to have the, they're playing, it seems to me that they want to play the middleman and they're using other people's money. And I get that. I get using other people's money, but Tava House is actually committing their own monies to the project. And that means something to me. I guess that's really all that I have to say about it.
Thank you, Mr. Gamelki. Ms. Riddell.
Yes, so my vote is going to be yes for Tava House. And my reasoning is I like the presentation and the vision that they have of a commercial and retail living area. I feel that this would create a destination motivation to our community. I also feel that the idea of the restaurant, steakhouse with the culinary school and a bouldering gym creates a lot of growth potential to our community, as well as attracting many more outside visitors coming into our community, which is what we really want. And if you look at the recent marketing project and questionnaire that was done by the city, our community members are asking for more of this type of these type of projects to be brought into the city. So I feel like they really took the time to acknowledge what our community wanted. And so that's what I really liked about their presentation. I feel that it does appeal to many members of our community and not just a certain segment of our community. I feel the Tava House has a commitment for financing, and the fact that they have a firm on board to build the homes in this type of project, I think is very positive. And I feel that because that they are members of our community, that they will take great care in moving this project forward and how it comes to fruition. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Riddell. And again, please email it to Ms. Al.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, we're going to Mr. Neal next.
Thank you very much, Tony. I will try to be brief.
You speak up a little bit, Rusty.
Yeah, let me get a little closer to my microphone because I'm reading from a different computer. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, I had hoped that the two projects could have merged into one because I do like aspects of each of the teams that was brought before us. That possibility is not on the table at this point in time. And it's up to the two parties whether they choose to go down that path on their own. So I will be casting a vote on one of the properties, knowing that it's a binary choice. I have always stated that when I ran for city council and when I sought out being the liaison for the DDA property, that my desires were to put the citizens of Woodland Park first. That's always been my number one priority as a council member and as a DDA board member. My view is slightly different by the laws of the DDA board. And every other member of the DDA really is looking out for the business's interest, whereas the council member looks out for the citizens. So I think it's a very wise blend the way that Colorado has written their laws of the purpose of a DDA and the composition of the board. So I have been listening to the citizens who do want more retail and restaurants. They have voiced that. Actually a little bit over housing. While housing is something they would like to see increased, their preference is retail and restaurants with Woodland Station, if you go through the comprehensive plans surveys. The housing stock increase is possible given the second part of the Tava House's presentation as well as Forge Work. Not necessarily attainable or affordable, which I think is probably wise also, given that it's the most central part of the city where housing could be. You would naturally expect it to be a little bit higher income, which is going to generate a little bit higher revenue for the city. But that also has the dominoing effect of maybe pulling some people into the center of town and then freeing up housing space on the other residential areas. A key component of the decision was for rapid delivery, kind of the bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, or I guess I'm interested in a good delivered product now versus a perfect product sometime in the future, because I too have been watching concept after concept presented and the concepts haven't gone too far. An important component is the financial viability. So the upscale housing coupled with, and the term was already used, commercial anchor. I think the Tava House commercial anchor is what will make this a very financially viable product. I like the amount of open space that I saw in the renderings, even though they are conceptual. There was a significant amount of open space feel in what I saw in those concept drawings from the Tava House. I am a fiscal conservative. I hate the thought of a vision investment of $100,000 being wasted by having a new vision effort So I will be casting my vote as a yes for the TAVA. And I wasn't going to bring this point up, but since Mr. Good had made it a point to say that the previous board were the boards that were acting in good faith and that this board is not acting in good faith, I'm going to give a little bit of a rebuttal to that. I view that this is a chance to correct a previous DDA wrong to the Tava House development team. I think that a previous board might have been serving in their own best interest, and I believe this board is actually serving the citizens better than I've ever seen a board. I think they're putting what's good for the community above all else. And I'm very proud to be a part of this DDA board with the members that I'm sitting with. And it's good to even have Mr. Good on the board because he does give a perspective from the past. So I do listen to what he does say. I consider it in my votes, but I think that the board that we currently have might be a little bit less self-serving than previous boards. And I'm very proud to be a part of this member of this board. And thank you. That is my vote. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. And again, send your information to Ms. Allen. Can I ask for a little clarification? You said in a final statement that you believe that this would correct a wrong from a previous board with the Tava group. Can you expand on that, or do you want to just leave that statement?
I can expand. I think that there was not, I don't think the negotiations were performed in good faith between the DDA board and the Tava House previously when they placed the COG rail card right on lot number 2. I did some investigation. The theory was that that was in motion long before the Tava House came along, but to place it on lot 2 while they were in the final throes of negotiating with Tava House conveyed a terrible message to the Tava House. And by an affirmative vote for the Tava House now, the money that they spent in trying to do this several years ago, that had been in the Courier, the citizens were all excited about it and were actually very upset when that whole project fell apart. So it's a chance for us to correct a wrong, in my opinion.
Thank you. Okay, it is my turn. I will start by saying that I believe that on page 53 in the last paragraph, second sentence, the Tava group answered Mr. Good's question regarding the infrastructure costs by stating that they had a commitment from TBK for their primary project, but also potential infrastructure costs in the development. So being a banker, I know what that means, and I recognize that's a pretty significant commitment from TBK, which probably speaks to the financial strength of the Tava group. I would differ from Mr. Neal in one respect that, yes, we are all business persons up here. I run a bank. Every person up here has businesses, successful businesses, and they all work very hard. I can confirm that because I watch them. I did say that both developments have risk. I mean, that is just the nature of this. And so, as a community banker, we're about relationship. We're about basically managing risk. We decide, is that loan risky or too risky for the bank? And our risk profile may be different than the bank next door. And so it's not a judgment, it's a risk assessment. And so factors in my vote were, I decided to choose the developer based on my perception of the least amount of the risk to the DDA in the city of Woodland Park. Another factor was Tava identified the anchor project. I think that is critical, and probably for the overall development, critical to completion of the actual project. I guess I should go ahead and say I am affirmative for the Tava Group in the motion. The Tava Group has a local team with a proven track record. I did quite a bit of research. For instance, Stantec is an amazing engineering firm, but I think I was able to confirm that the Tava's engineers that done actually more local projects and more projects in Colorado Springs than Stantec. Now, worldwide, can't make that case, but being a local community banker, local matters to me. All the owners are local and currently invested in the community. They live here, they work here, and they are invested here. I like the Tava proposal because the offer of $800,000, if I did some rough math and compared it to the acquisition of Lot 1 by the Woodland Hardware Store, it puts out to about the same per square foot cost. So I think that's consistent. And I suspect, I think I said this before, I suspect that's how they arrived at that number to be consistent with Lot 1 and Woodland Hardware. Now, the caveat on Woodland Hardware was they paid $200,000 for Lot 1, but the DDA put in $900,000 worth of cash for infrastructure and development. In a counterpoint to Mr. Good, I will say that as we move forward, it's not about what could happen, what might happen. This board and maybe a future board, depending on members, gets to decide, do we do a TIF deal? Do we support any additional monies? And so we have a say. It's not a given. And the fact that Tava has communicated that they understand the infrastructure costs, they understand the environmental factors, they understand challenges with the ditch, as some of us like to refer to it. They understand the challenges of detention, which is important, and initial assessment based on everything I could tell is the current detention pond wasn't engineered very well, even for Lot 1, and so that's going to have to be dealt with. And so it's 6.3 acres. It's only 6.3 acres, but it has a lot of warts on it that have to be resolved. I did do some additional work or research on David Weekley. There was a comment that they build tract homes, and that is correct. I think, in fact, I've read that they're going to put 25,000 homes east of Colorado Springs here shortly. But 30% of their business nationwide is what they call urban infill. It's these little kind of projects that are unique, that are challenging, that create opportunity to create something different. So they're not just a tract home builder, and that's out there in the public record. The beauty of Google, I guess. The offer from Tava will facilitate paying off the land loan with the city. And that's approximately $550,000 that's left that the DDA owes the city for the land. So obviously that has to be factored into the transaction to make sure that the city gets paid off as appropriate with this transaction. Tava has made it clear that, yes, they're putting in the anchor projects, and they've suggested another project. I don't think I heard a commitment regarding the bouldering gym, though I think it would be fabulous in this property. They are committed in what I heard and what I've read and what I've seen in the presentations to getting the 6.3 acres developed. And so, again, there's a risk there. The market could dictate something different just 2 years from now. We're in a very volatile, evolving marketplace and economic situation, but they are committed and have indicated multiple times that their plan is to get going right away and break ground as soon as possible. And so putting that anchor in is important to me. They have existing funding commitments for the project infrastructure. They have committed to finding those additional commercial entities. And whether it's the bouldering gym, and I would challenge them to put effort into reaching out to existing local businesses, because I know of quite a few that are in a position that they're relocating their business in town would be advantageous to them. So I would encourage you to seek them out and to encourage them to seek you out. And that may help fill out the rest of the commercial. I thought about the risk of David Weekly. They have a 60-day due diligence process once Tava acquires the property to push the go button. What if David Weekly drops out? I know of several builders for this size project, which isn't large, who would be willing to step in at that point, given that we have anchor projects, that there's a deal and they're dealing with another private entity. So I truly hope that David Weekly is that party. And as I think Mr. Neal suggested, it could be theoretically ForgeWorks that steps in and fills that residential void if David Weekly drops out. But that, again, I would caution us that the number one mistake I think this DDA board has made in 20 years is trying to dictate the market, trying to tell the market what to do and who to work with and how to work with, trying to tell the market what the vision is. Frankly, what we see before us is an anchor project, the hope of a bouldering gym, and we have to sit back and watch. But we will take great pains in the construction of the agreement to make sure that there are protections built in for the DDA and the city in the case of non-performance by the Tava Group. So we do have some control over the future. We do have a say in any future TIF deal. At this juncture, it is not in my head for the city, the DDA, ergo the DDA, to provide infrastructure like we did on Lot 1 in Woodland Station. It's my intention that the developer figure that out. Now, if we identify some grants and some other monies from outside the community that we can bring to the table to assist the developer in that process, game on. But I have no appetite at this juncture to fund infrastructure like we did in Lot 1. That's just my perspective. But I think TIF, whether it was ForgeWorks or Tava, is appropriate. But again, we get to weigh in and we have a duty to be consistent with what's been done before with respect to that TIF agreement. And we have a ticking time of the DDA wind down in 2032. Now, not to say that it can't be extended. It's not my desire to do that personally, but we'll take that when it comes. So finally, I like the idea. And when I look at it from a risk perspective, from a banker perspective, if I'm breaking ground right now on a project of this nature, that's going to be completed in the next 15 to 18 months. It's almost perfect timing in my world for coming out of the current economic melees and recession to come online. So, so again, my vote is aye for the motion, and my count is 6 ayes and 1 nay. So the motion carries to select Tava as the developer for Woodland Station.
Are you having any public comment?
We are right after the, yes, yeah. It is on, coming up next after the board discussion. So with that, I guess if the other board members want to return to the dais, Mr. Weatherford, Mr. Maharis, you're welcome to do so. Item 8 now is board discussion of items not on the agenda.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, to continue this particular topic, do we need to have a motion directing you and another person to enter into negotiations with the Teva House Group to consummate this deal?
Yeah,
Or
so.
do you have enough direction?
Yeah, so I think there's several based on what I think I'm learning, because I've been reading a lot and trying to get a read. I believe that this board has voted to approve Tava as the developer. I think we need to, I believe, get on the agenda with the city council so that the city council can weigh in, and I expect that I would come and communicate the DDA board's decision to city council, and then they need to weigh in. Am I accurate with that? We have 3 city council members in the room. It looks like one online. I think that's what I've seen in the past. Is that correct?
Tony, I'll go ahead and as the liaison make comment. In my DDA liaison report this upcoming Thursday, I will make a motion to add a presentation by yourself at the next city council meeting as an official topic. If it's seconded, then we can go ahead and get you in officially to present to the city council.
Okay, so you made a motion for this DDA board to advance that. Did I hear that correct?
I will actually try to get a consensus. I believe there'd
gotcha.
be a consensus in the report section versus an actual vote. A consensus by at least one other member is all it takes to place the topic on a future agenda. I will try to get it as quickly as possible because speed is important on these projects for the development team. So I will try to get it on the second Thursday of the month. And I will do that at this first Thursday city council meeting in 2 days.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bourne, to answer your question, I think one thing for the Tava group to, I guess I'll make the public statement, and this would have applied to Forge Works as well. So there's several parts to this. So the Tava group, once they acquire the property, will have to go through the standard planning process. They'll have to go in front of the planning commission. They'll have to have public hearing there. Then they'll have to go in front of city council with public hearing and on first reading or public hearing on at the second meeting of city council. So they have 4 more meetings coming up to actually get the project going through the entitlement process. I would encourage them to reach out to the city planning director as soon as possible to talk about that process and how to better collaborate. And again, we would be happy to sit in on that meeting and participate. And Mr. Bourne, I think we could start preparations. I personally am not a fan of spending attorney time. I think we have to see the city council weigh in first. For better or worse, I think that's just the reality of timing. But that doesn't mean that we can't prep. What I saw from the Tava group was a standard contract, commercial contract, which is fairly easy to execute. That's not going to be difficult. More difficult is coming up with a strong, tight development agreement. And if you paid attention to a lot of the questionnaire that we gave to both applicants, that actually, there's some foundational pieces in there that will help inform us on the development agreement. So my intention would be to do as much as work as possible to pre-flight everything as much as possible. But until we have formal approval by city council, I'm not going to be confident with spending attorney monies or signing any agreements in the interim.
Also, Mr. Chairman, where I'm coming from on this, as I pursue some of the records on the property, the documents indicating a purchase reflects on 6.3 acres. However, the county assessors shows it as 6.63 acres.
Correct.
So that'll have to be resolved. Also, the south property line needs to be resolved as to
Correct.
where it actually lies. So there's some you know, little nitpicky things in there that need to be determined before I guess we enter into a formal purchase agreement.
Correct, yeah,
So there may
so,
be others out there that I'm not familiar with too.
yeah, so I think Tava has a fairly aggressive contract process, but we're gonna have to get some of these things resolved.
Yeah.
You know, I know of 2 surveys that have been done, and we have to make sure that's out in, because we have to convey the property legally.
Yeah,
I'm gonna argue that we do it through title company. I'm gonna argue at some juncture, we're gonna ask the Tava Group to put monies in escrow at the title company as part of that transaction. I've already reached out to Matrix Engineering. They did all the engineering on the property. There's a 538-page V-Cup environmental assessment that was done back, I think, in that 2009. So again, on the city DDA site, there's a link called Woodland Station Property, and we're gonna start pushing every piece of data that we can find into there so that we start forming the basis for the agreement and make sure that we convey the property properly, that we have all the information necessary to do a proper development agreement. My perspective, reading through all the TIF agreements, saw a lot of handwritten notes and additions to the agreements and initials, and to me, that's just sloppy work. I don't like that. And so we're going to do this right and proper. And so I guess I am signaling to Tava that we're going to work as expeditiously as possible. Possibly, if the city council approves our recommendation, we may have most of the items ready to go to at least enter into a contract pending additional due diligence and clarification. But it may not be as quick as the market would like in this instance. We are government. So any other discussion? Yes, sir.
This is in response to you, trustee. I wasn't gonna bring it up, but I take offense with your accusing the previous DDA board that we should apologize for not negotiating in good faith. I've got here a email sent from Mark Weaver to Derek Wagner and Arden Weatherford back at November 12th, 2019. It says, guys, I met with Sally this afternoon, and in the course of that meeting, I mentioned that we had heard that the DDA board was trying to sell a small parcel just south of the Marigas site. She just smiled and said she would neither confirm nor deny, to which I said, our group has plans to use that parcel and keep it for the use and benefit for everyone. She just said, oh, okay. Then it goes on to say, we then went on with the conversation that we want to avoid dealing with the DDA at all cost, literally all cost in capitals. And that was our plan moving forward. Then they go on to still mentioning about pulling lot 2 out of the DDA overlay. Now that is not the DDA negotiating in bad faith. That was the situation there. I take umbrage. You owe the past DDA board an apology, sir.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so I don't think either applicant brought that up, but there is south of the former AmeriGas property, a parcel that is owned by the city. And I'm not sure what the applicants or now Tava thinks of that in terms of how that would be used, but I suspect that it is owned by the city, and so there would need to be discussions directly with the city regarding that. It is not in the DDA property, so we wouldn't weigh in. It's my understanding that It sits on top of some infrastructure that basically a road or a parking lot is probably the only appropriate use based on my research. But that's a good point. And I'm not really sure, Mr. Good, on the timing of that relative to the meetings that were being had, but thank you for your statement. Anything else from the other board members? Okay, so I'm not as we'll go on and move to number 9, audience participation. And it says items not on the agenda, but clearly there's one main agenda today. So I will accept public comment, and I'm not as organized as Ms. Leclerc. And so in the future, we'll try to have a sign-up sheet in the back so that you could sign up to discuss. I'm not going to go around the room and ask each person if they want to say something. So if you're interested in public comment, raise your hand. I will acknowledge you, and then you could come to the podium. And I would ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes. And I would ask that you state your name and the city you live in. Not your address, because in today's world, we don't need to be publicizing that, but please come forth. So, ma'am? Yes. Yes, you can come on up.
Okay, thank you. Kitten Walker. I live in Woodland Park.
Thank you.
So those of you that know me know that I like to open with prayer. So I'm just going to open with a quick prayer. So Heavenly Father, I just thank you for this opportunity to be a citizen of Woodland Park. I thank you for this opportunity to address the DDA. I thank you for this opportunity to gain knowledge, which is information, understanding, which connects the dots to the information, and wisdom, which is how I would use the information. So I just pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So I'm seeking knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. I'm new to the DDA meetings. My schedule has been cleared so I can start attending the meetings and gain the knowledge that I'm seeking. So today there were some invoices paid to Miss Allen and to the DDA attorney. But there was nothing that told what was being paid for. So in the future, I would appreciate if there's invoices being paid, if there was an explanation as to what the invoices are referring to. That would really be helpful. The other thing that I am seeking is information and understanding on the TIF. I've spoken to, I guess, citizens of Woodland Park, and not one person that I've spoken to has been able to explain the TIF. They don't understand themselves, and they've lived here much longer than I have. So I'm asking if one of the DDA board members is willing to have coffee and spend time with me, helping me to learn and understand the TIF, specifically the property tax aspect of it. And being transparent, I'm wanting to understand the firehouse issue with property tax according to the TIF. So are they getting the full property tax funding, or is that postponed until the TIF agreement is ended? You know, how does that work, and how is that affecting the firehouse? So I want to thank the board. I want to thank Mr. Good for being so bold as to call out the discrepancies, I guess I could call it. And I honestly, since I've moved here and have been seeking, learning, the local government entities, I've heard not much good about the DDA. I'm not interested in the history. I know what I've seen with the city council appointing members of the DDA. And honestly, it does not give the city council a good image, and it does not give the DDA a good image. As far as Mr. Neal being a city council member and a DDA board member, I understand Mr. Neal, you explained the law, and I appreciate that. I understand it's not illegal, but can I say that it does not give a good impression personally as a citizen that you would be on both instead of just a liaison between. So I'm just asking that you take that into consideration. And honestly, I believe there are like 8,000 residents of Woodland Park, and I'm sure that there would be at least one non-council, board member that could be appointed as secretary. So again, I'm seeking knowledge, understanding, and wisdom, so I can be really well informed. I don't want to have misinformed ideas. I really want to know what is happening.
Okay.
So, and one other suggestion, is my time up?
Almost.
Okay, one other suggestion, via a friend of mine who came today. I'm not going to tell you who, but is it possible, since the meeting is at 7:30 a.m., that we could have a coffee pot in the back of the room? So just saying.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
So let me respond to a couple of things. I think you were one of the ladies after several meetings ago that I offered to meet for lunch, and you were unable to attend.
Correct.
So I will extend personally, I don't drink coffee, but I'll extend an offer to buy you coffee and to go through some of these points. What we got here today was a collated board packet for today. That will be on the DDA document site on the city website. And so our intention is going to be to get that published. Maybe the goal will be 10 days ahead of the meeting, not only for the DDA board, but also for the public. So we're working very hard to push out everything that we're doing in a public way. With regards to the invoice process and the invoices, those are public as well. And so we'd be happy to go through those with you. Would be happy to explain the TIF to you. I agree. It's in some ways, it's a very complicated process. In some ways, it's very easy. I would also be able to explain to you how the DDA within the district, we actually take mills away from the fire district, the ambulance service, and some other entities. And I'd be happy to explain that and why fire is such an important kind of red flag for me that we pay attention to as a DDA. So I'd be happy to meet with you. Mrs. Betterman knows how to get in contact with me. And so I'd be happy to have her accompany you as well and meet at your convenience. So
Okay.
Please reach out to me.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman, would it be wise at this point to go over the state's enabling legislation that creates the DDA, which also then defines the composition of the board?
I don't have an appetite for it.
Okay.
I think maybe for, the statute is pretty clear. I
Yeah.
think I intend to have a work session coming up where we have the attorney going through several things with us. Conflicts of interest, and maybe that statutory information to make it clear how it's constituted, why it's constituted.
To pick up on one of her points, if I recall right, the state statutes and its composition of the board dictates that a member of city council will be a member of the board. So Rusty is here by statutory requirement.
Correct. Yeah, and we'll review that when we get
Yeah.
together for coffee
Yeah.
/ milk. I drink milk. Anything else? Okay, anyone else in the audience wish to speak? Yes, Mr. Councilman Zulaga.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, board members, Robert Zuluaga, City Council. I want to speak about the protecting the city and the DDA. Well, first, I want to say your procedures are a little different than we're accustomed to. Normally, there's a motion made, then there's discussion about the motion, then it's open for public comment, and then each member weighs in. And the theory behind that is that the public may have some insight to areas that you haven't considered. So I'm not sure what the legality is, the way you do what you do, but I'm not familiar with this type of process. My concern is for the protecting the liability of the city and the DDA. There's been a lot of tension for 20 years with the DDA. And a lot of you have experience with the history in the city. Some of you don't. It troubles me that the transition to the new board has disregarded the past. And for all sorts of reasons, political, personal, all sorts of issues, we are where we are. But my concern is that the past tells us something. The past has some markers and some cautions that we're wise to listen to. When I developed, or was in the process of developing a commercial development in Arizona, there's a process that the buyer goes through of due diligence. And that includes a phase 1 and a phase 2 environmental study. And I know that's the responsibility of the party that's been awarded this. But my concern about the liability to the city and to the DDA is we know there are environmental concerns with that property. And I'm not an attorney, but we have to look at the liability. We're rushing to, I say rushing to it, there's a process. I would contend that over 20 years, we haven't had the players who are sophisticated enough to understand urban planning. And it's gone through lots of tries, but we haven't really had the experience of urban planning. Now we have a couple of players who have some experience. One seems more than the other, but regardless, the liability. If we've got environmental concerns, where does that, we transfer title, where does that responsibility lie? If there's liability on that property that we already had some idea of, but proceeded. So I'm concerned that when we transfer title, are there issues that we as a city and as a DDA can solve that the new buyer cannot? I don't have an answer for it. It's just a question for you. Have we looked at this? Are we so interested in rushing into let's get it developed that we're missing some of the issues that caused it not to develop up till now? So that's my biggest concern I want to bring to your attention. And, you know, we are where we are in this process. So all the best to the one that you've selected. But your methodologies, I just challenge some of the methodologies that you've utilized. A good effort, good effort for sure, commendable. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councilman Zuluaga. I'll weigh in a little bit. I mentioned the 538-page VCUP report from Matrix Engineering. This was Matrix Engineering did a complete environmental impact study, and I believe and think about Lot 1 was developed with Woodland Hardware. And so that is a factor that is important. I can tell you that TBK Bank is the funder of the additional funds in addition to the capital from the Tava Group. They will weigh in, and then from a bank perspective, they will decide whether they're going to require yet another environmental study, and there's multiple levels. The VCUP was probably the highest level you could get. It found, and actually there's a picture on the wall back there of a gas tank, benzene tank that's sitting up on a pedestal, and it's positioned approximately between Vectra and the roundabout, the little decrepit, deteriorating roundabout that's, I think, was an amphitheater. And so it is suspected that that's where the benzene plume came from. The initial report I saw in that 538 pages is that the mitigation was wrapping the foundation with a barrier. And that seemed to be all it was indicating, but we don't have confirmation yet. So yes, in transfer of the property to Tava, they're going to want to make sure, the bank's going to want to make sure, we're going to make sure, especially in the development agreement, that we're transferring those risks to the developer and to make sure that we understand the backside risk from a legal perspective. So there is a lot of work to be done. I would argue that the expedition was to, the expeditious part on the board was to make sure that we listened to both applicants and that we came to a decision. We didn't make this process linger for 6 months or 9 months further. But it does not mean that we can afford to be expeditious in the process. The process is what it is. We have to check all the boxes from a liability risk perspective. If you looked at the contract that's been published from the Tava Group, they even indicated they have concerns about, let's say, the artistic rendering of the wagon that's over there, that they have concerns that that's a potential hazard for anyone visiting the property. So I can assure you that we will not cut corners and that we will make sure that the city, the DDA are protected and that it makes sense. The bank, I promise you, will make sure that it makes sense for the applicant. So anyway.
Chairman Perry,
Yes, Mr. Neal.
we do have someone in the audience who is a participant that is got their hands up. So
Yep.
Perhaps.
Is that Miss Case?
Correct.
Okay, can we, I guess, I don't know, promote her to be a participant?
Is Rob in the room? He would have that control.
Yeah.
And it appears that she is now a panelist, but her video and audio is still off at this point.
Hi there. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. This is Mayor Pro Tem Case, and I wanted to just make a comment as an active real estate agent in the community and licensed by the state. Through the purchase process of the land and the purchase contract, there are due diligence dates and obligations that will be met. One of them being the seller's property disclosure. And all of those items that Mr. Zuluaga is referring to, I feel certain that the DDA will disclose all knowledge they have with regards to the property. So all of that is really part of the due diligence of the purchase of the land, as well as Mr. Perry mentioned, part of the obligations in the agreement. So I just wanted to assure the audience that the real estate purchase process is very, very thorough. And I know that you all will do the best you can to disclose all the knowledge that you have. Thank you for letting me weigh in.
Thank you, Ms. Case. Yeah, and I'll add again that I've reached out to Matrix Engineering to see if they'll provide, and Eric Smith, a former council member, to see if they'll provide all their original source documents to expedite gathering that environmental risk materials. We have them, but they're very disparate in various places, and it's been difficult to pull files together in an organized manner. So we'll get it done now. Anyone else wish to communicate, speak?
There are no more hands raised that I can see.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience? Okay, so I'll make a final statement that again, I don't think as a DDA, as a city, given the 20-year history, 21-year history of the DDA, that we have ever had two applicants step forward willing to expend time, energy, monies to go through this process. I think, frankly, both applicants had valid processes. I think both applicants had very, very valid targets of how they were going to do it that are both relevant in the marketplace, in my opinion. And so hopefully to ForgeWorks and Mr. Williams, Mr. Crozier, thank you for your effort and time, and we'll see how this plays out. Hopefully we've made a good decision, and hopefully you've learned more about our community, hopefully in a good way. And hopefully you want to play in the sandbox in another way within our community. I can say, regardless of other comments that have been made, I walked in to this process with a bias, and I challenged myself to stay open-minded, to wait and look at the data, look at the information. I think it frankly helped us that if we would have had two applicants that were very similar approaches, similar offers, I think it would have been very, very difficult. So I think it helped us that we had two different offers. And I think, from a ForgeWorks perspective, I think what you saw is that these are all local business persons. We've invested in the community. And so I think the local factor I heard weighed heavily in this decision, and I wouldn't take that as a slight. I know Mr. Crozier and Williams now live here and are part of our community. Thank you. But again, thank you, both applicants. I know it was a lot of work. And the questionnaire in particular, because it was thrown at you with a fairly short fuse, but I believe both groups were professional enough to pull it together, and you did. So that really helped me codify my perspective. So any other final comments? Okay, thank you. We are adjourned.
Oh, we've got stuff down at the shop.